hereditary material.
That is the problem. There has to be some information that carries with it a selective advantage, and by having an advantage, that information is propagated from one generation to the next. That is the most fundamental definition. And that actually is the hallmark of Darwinian evolution. It means that there are no changes happening in the current generation. That information is passed to the next.
So in your work, what he's describing is he's describing these minute bubbles that where you have chemistry in them, where you are trying to change you have a molecule in it, and you're trying to change the chemistry of the molecule by its own selection. So presumably someday you could make it into a better drug, or into a drug that would selectively attack a target you want it to, right?
I think that is the target for directed evolution as a field. I mean, it is the practical outcome, is that we have this amazing tool that allows us to generate all possible answers to whatever question we care to ask, and not know what the answer looks like to design it, but just to be able to pluck out from that pool.
So you're talking about changing chemicals, but it has really nothing to do with life, to get back to what I said before.
It's not a self-sustained replicating system, no.
Yeah.
But evolution is only one part of that equation, correct?
So we have a lot of questions here about what encourages people to get into science and the need for more scientists in the world. Just tell us a little personal anecdote about what attracted each of you to wanting to do what you're doing.
You know, it's hard to answer because I was always interested, just as far back as I can remember. I was always interested in science. I wanted to be a scientist before I really knew what that meant. And yeah, I've definitely been encouraged by, great teachers along the way. And just by the fact that opportunities have continuously opened up, and just doing experiments is just so much fun that I wouldn't want to do anything else.
What about you, Brian?
I actually can't say that I wanted to be a scientist my whole life. I ended up at a science and tech magnet school, high school, so I was immediately immersed in this material. And I did exceedingly well in chemistry, and so that kind of prompted me to major in chemistry as an undergraduate. It was really, as an undergraduate, when I got to see that science was more than following some cookbook recipes, that there was more to this. It was investigation. It was kind of free fall. It was a scary thing, as much as an undergraduate can understand. And it was really then the desire to break out from what is chemistry to a field which has almost no
Well, let me follow up on that, because Jack, when you were putting up, I'm sorry for those of you who didn't see it, but Jack was put up a whole set of organic chemistry formulas today, which just thrilled him to death. I mean, he was just so excited to look at all these rings, and that he had substituted this atom in this place for that atom in that place, and it allowed him to do something different. And I was a biochemistry major myself, so I didn't understand this until I had children who went to college, and then I realized that organic chemistry is this great wall that stops enormous numbers of students who think of themselves as future scientists or physicians, and they ram up against it, and they fail to proceed on to science or medicine, and they end up being all kinds of things like English majors or lawyers or whatever, and or dropouts. And so when your talk today, and I don't mean to take anything away from Jack, but
can I just say, so that happened to me too, right? I kind of hit the wall in chemistry and bounced into biology.
But your bounce into biology made you go back and love chemistry.
Right. So once I knew what we had to do and why it was interesting, then it got to be really fun.
And Brian, when you talked today about, I wish everybody could have seen this, because this idea of bringing chemistry into uniting it with the world of microchips, of course, is very exciting. And you did it in a way that's very visual. But is it possible, do you think, to teach organic chemistry in a way that doesn't turn off so many people? Because a lot of people talk about our lack of science education being such a huge problem.
Absolutely. I was taught by two brilliant people at Duke. I enjoyed it very much so. I cannot recrystallize a sample to save my life. But I did very well in the classroom. I realized then I was not to synthesize molecules, but to align lasers and build microscopes and so forth.
Okay, well,
Chemistry.
I don't we haven't answered the question, but maybe we can get an answer.
I think there's a lot of move to change how chemistry is taught and by bringing in more real-world examples or examples from biology. And I think that's inspiring a lot more students to go into chemistry.
Here's the crystallizing point, though, in organic chemistry. I went through 2 semesters learning about SN2 reactions and all of this kind of very esoteric, how do we put bonds together? And it wasn't until the very end where they put up a structure, they put up DNA, but they replaced the cartoon with atoms. And I sat there and I looked at it and I realized why I was sitting in that class. And it took 2 semesters to finally get to that point where you're like, this is the reason why we're learning this.
Yeah, I think there's something interesting in that. But to further on that, we have 2 people who I would call heroes, and without even knowing them, but because I'm going to call on them for the first questions from the audience. And the reason for this is because they are science teachers. And not only are they science teachers, a species that we definitely need to have much more of in this country, they are also science teachers who care enough about their jobs to come here and try to learn to do a better job of it. So let's start with Retha Prescott of Atlantic Community High School. Would you ask whatever you want to ask? I have some questions for you. I'm not going to read your questions. You ask whatever you want.
I just wanted to ask, what are the implications for global research? Given the steady decline of students who are choosing science as a major.
I think obviously if that trend was reeling, continued globally, that would be a disaster. I don't think that's actually the case. I mean, it may be harder to get a lot of students in this country, but I think globally, I mean, you see a new generation of scientists, coming to prominence in China and India. And I think depending on where you look in this country, I mean, actually at Harvard, I just read in the newspaper, I was shocked. The enrollment in science courses has gone up by 50% in the last couple of years. So I thought that was very encouraging.
Well, on that point, is it something that America needs to worry about in its own economic future? Because there's a lot of talk about that. Or is it going to be just taken care of in an evolutionary kind of way, Darwinian way, by the people who are interested in it coming in to taking it over?
Well, I mean, if we don't get our act together in this country and encourage the sciences, then we will become second place to other parts of the world.
So do you think that's a real phenomenon, either of you?
I think you're sitting in an example of it. The state of Florida wanted to invest. They saw the future as science, and that is why this place exists. We need to invest in it. It's the bottom line.
You got your dean nodding, so you did good. Next question comes from Fred Hawk, who is another teacher at Atlantic Community High School. Fred Hawk.
I just wanted to ask, as science teachers, we're fighting a constant battle. I know you said you didn't want to get into the Florida statutes and Texas things, but there's so much of an emphasis placed on standardized testing with our district. What concepts do you 2 gentlemen think are the most important for us to get across to high school students regarding evolutionary processes?
You want to start?
So the message is that evolution, the theory of evolution is what explains biology. If you do not understand this process, there is no hope to understand any more of the complexity that you see in life. And not just life, but how your immune system works, how bacteria become resistant to antibiotics. I mean, this is not just understanding how finches live on the Galapagos. This is a real problem. It's a real problem. And there's real promise in research being able to harness, once you understand these principles, harness them to create new, very promising molecules. So, and as far as how to communicate it, it has to be communicated forthrightly and directly with no strings attached.